All right, so this section is the storyboarding process. And this is where, instead of writing with words, we write with drawings, and we put them on little pieces of paper, and it's sort of seeing the movie in comic book form. And we'll do a section of a movie at a time, and we'll pin them all up on boards, and then when we get a certain chunk done, we'll show them to the directors, or they will show them to us. And I don't know, it's kind of complicated.
Well, you know, that was a really good description of it.
Storytelling. What makes a great storyteller?
What's a Mom? It's a 50-foot baby from outer space.
The storyteller is the person who invents.
Take this sentence. A red dog. What pops up into your head? Although it's only 3 words, it allows for endless possibilities of what this red dog could be. I love reading stories. But more importantly, I love telling stories. I believe deep down, each human being is a storyteller. And a story can be expressed in a number of ways.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Whether that be interpreting a play, speaking to someone, interpreting a painting, or sending a text message.
Did I stutter?
We tell people of the good times and the bad. We place certain emphasis on certain areas of our story and shy away at other parts. Indeed, we are the editors of our own lives.
In your heart, you're a storyteller, aren't you?
Yes.
That's what you are.
Yes, I completely agree with you. I mean, I feel that I'm a storyteller. That's all. That's all. Storyteller.
See that guy speaking? His name is John Berger. He was a man of many talents, including an art critic, painter, and poet. But these mediums all have something in common. Berger is telling us a story in each one. And his short story, The Red Tenda of Bologna, is no exception. The Red Tenda of Bologna is just 56 pages long, and it measures at just 15 centimeters by 10 centimeters. But inside these pages are a tale the reader feels instantly connected to. Each page is different. The amount of text on each page varies. 20 lines are the most a page will ever have, and 2 lines are the minimum. The rest is given up to his own ivory blankness. Berger tells his uncle at the beginning of the story that Bologna is the city of Morandi. And if we look at Morandi's paintings and Berger's book, we can notice some similarities. There is a sort of minimalism in Morandi's paintings and Berger's story. Less is more in The Red Tenda of Bologna, and Berger invites us to use our imagination rather than depending on his words to do the imagining for us. The book follows Berger's experience of Bologna, a dreamlike meditation on memory, food, paintings, and a fond uncle. He talks about how there's no traffic except bicycles, the Piazza Maggiore, the university, and finally, the Due Torri, or the 2 towers.
Now, perspective centers everything on the eye of the beholder. It is like a beam from a lighthouse, only instead of light traveling outwards, appearances travel in. And our tradition of art called those appearances reality. Perspective makes the eye the center of the visible world.
Okay, maybe I am being a little biased. Berger does have a point. Perspective does center everything on the eye of the beholder. When I initially picked up this book, it was because it had Bologna in its title. I used to be a student at the University of Bologna during my year abroad. Before COVID-19 took place, I had what could be argued to be the best experience of my university life. I made friends from all over the world, and I was able to study in Italian. These memories combined have allowed me to have a much more personal experience with this book. It is, as Berger says,
In being related, it is given meaning. A story is always a rescuing operation, which is another way of saying a shelter.
Well, of the absurd?
Against the absurd, against that endless, terrifying space in which we live.
With these unprecedented times going on, it's nice to be able to relate to a book and relive certain memories again.
Shake it, bitch!
I think think of that as the quality of fiction and storytelling, restoring the claims of intensity of feeling.
The story contains a meaning.
Although I was reading this book at home, I felt like I was transported back to Bologna.
I think that as soon as a story is printed, this is very important, as soon as a story is printed, it is transportable in a way that an oral story isn't.
Just how did Berger manage to make me imagine the way I did when reading this?
The meaning of an image can be changed according to what you see beside it or what comes after it.
By carefully choosing his words, we are able to access an interpretation of his experience in Bologna. Had I not studied in Bologna and made these amazing, amazing memories, I don't think I'd be reading or interpreting this book in the same way. Reading this book made me feel nostalgic about a period in my life, which was unfortunately cut short as a result of the pandemic.
If writers have taken trouble with words, I owe them that. Besides, I'm careful what I read. One should never read rubbish. It could be infectious. One might start writing it.
But I think Bologna is just one aspect of this novel. Rather, what Bologna represented. To me, this is also Berger's way of showing tribute to his late uncle, who he admired very much. He says of his uncle, "I should begin with how I loved him, in what manner, with what degree, with what kind of comprehension. I loved him for his imperturbability. He carried with him a pair of spectacles, each pair with different lenses. He examined everything." Berger invites the reader to share their special bond between them through the city of Bologna. His uncle, although no longer present in the physical realm, continues to exist in the imagination of Berger, which we can see when he describes his time at a shop called Tessutilino, Cotone e Lana Tendaggi. What do you imagine when you hear this? The owner leans forward. I recognize him. He pretends not to recognize me. His conspirational expression is familiar. The last time he put it on was when I had given him his tie and was saying goodbye to him in the hospital. Berger's way of storytelling goes beyond just telling a story. He allows the reader to feel an emotion when reading his words, and as a result, we are able to connect deeply with it.
When once the story has begun, we listeners find ourselves in an eternal present. The time in the story goes beyond.
Berger talks about a red tender, which, as well as being a blind for keeping sunlight out, may also be one for keeping grief in, and for cultivating determination. This line alone shows the reader the importance of his uncle in his life, and the action of buying some red cloth means that he will carry the memories of his uncle with him wherever he goes.
Secretly or openly, we all know that there are meanings, moments, forces, which seem to us to outlast time.
Reality has no meaning, but the storyteller gives it meaning.
And this is what I find fascinating about perspectives. We will never fully know the meaning of this book, since we're not Berger. At most, we can only have assumptions about his intentions.
And even in stories, I don't know that I would say that every detail has to be essential. I would say that every detail has to be powerful. It has to do with some meaning that I could sum up.
There is no intensity in a story which actually matches the intensity of what is lived.
I think that by reading this book for the second time, it made me appreciate that this book could have been written as a tribute to Berger's uncle and how Bologna represented him. Reading this book also made me feel emotional because I miss Bologna. I miss my friends, I miss studying, and I miss exploring this beautiful city. I connected with this book purely due to my own personal experience with the city.
The imagination runs riot.